at Image, you're basically the owner of a restaurant. To be the owner of your own restaurant and have Red Lobster call and be like, hey, you want to come cook some fish for us? And be like, oh my God, finally I'm getting called to the big leagues. I get to be at the grill at a Red Lobster. And it's like, you owned your own restaurant.
Take me back to when you were a comics fan and you're gobbling up all the Spider-Man and X-Men issues that McFarlane and Jim Lee and Eric Larson are working on.
There's this little thin shelf in Walmart on the edge of the aisle that's got 2 books side by side, and people would flip through them like this. And so the first 3 books in the shelf were always just bent completely in half. And so I'd be like, oh, well, this one's not bent too bad, so I'll buy that. And so like that's my comic buying, you know, experience, because I lived in Cynthiana, Kentucky, which was very small. And so we're going to Lexington, Kentucky, which is the big city. We're driving, and all of a sudden I see this sign that says Comic Interlude. Whoa, hold on a second. Is this like a store that sells comic books? It's like you go in and it's like a place and you give them money. Like what? That you can get them in places.
That's literally the first comic shop you ever
I didn't even know a comic book store existed. I don't know if I wasn't reading the ads in the back of comics because they would say things about, you know, but like, you know, a lot of the ads in the back for comic shops looked like catalog things. And you're like, I don't know what the hell this is. I open the door and I'm walking in and there's this giant Youngblood poster. But I was like, what is it? Rob Liefeld's Youngblood? What the hell is Youngblood? So I walk in and I go to the clerk and I'm like, what's this Youngblood thing? And he's like, you haven't heard of Image Comics? I'm like, no, I have no idea. And he's like, oh my God, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Will Portacio, Rob Liefeld, they're all leaving. They're all leaving and they're going and they're doing their own books and they formed this company called Image Comics. And I'm like, oh my God. And then he's like, you wanna start a pull folder? I'm like, well, what the hell is a pull folder? Like, what are we talking about here? And he's like, well, you know, when any of the Image comics come out, you know, you just tell us if you want them, and we'll hold them for you, and we'll put them in this box. Every time you come in, like, they're there. And I'm like, what is this magical place? Like, oh my God.
They will hold your comics for you.
It's just life-changing. And so for, you know, the longest time, I had a pull box at this comic store that just said Robert Kirkman, all Image titles. To be able to, like, go into a comic shop for the first time and learn about Image Comics, like, in that moment was a pretty life-changing experience for me.
It was a weird time for comics because it's always been like the bastard redheaded stepchild of the entertainment industry, except for around that moment.
No, in the 90s, it was everything.
Crazy.
It was, you know, CNN's doing articles on comics, and you got Rob Liefeld in a 501 Button Your Fly jeans commercial, and Wildcats is suddenly a cartoon, Savage Dragons cartoon. Like, everything was seemingly everywhere at that time, and it was a pretty great time to be reading comics.
So you went from being a fan of Image to then working for Image and being a collaborator with some of these guys. When you worked with Liefeld on The Infinite, what was that like? Was that kind of weird? Because I would imagine it's cool and it's awesome, but then it must be a little weird working with a guy whose poster you bought off eBay and put on your office wall.
I'm, you know, very good friends with all these guys now, and oftentimes I'll be hanging out with them at a convention, and I'll be like, if you only knew what the walls of my bedroom looked like when I was a child, like, looked like a serial killer's bedroom. Like, I would have like pages of Wizard cut out, and I'd paste their art here, and just, you know, posters everywhere, and you know, you just sit there talking to a guy like, oh yeah, I remember 13, I used to draw pictures while I was under your poster, and it's just surreal. But you know, Rob and I collaborated on The Infinite, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, I wish we had been able to do more issues of it, but a comic book writer's job, essentially, is to tell the artist what to draw. You know, like, hey, guy's doing this, guy's doing that, guy's, you know, and to be able to like write things down, and then Rob Liefeld like turns them into magical comic book pages. Like, I don't know, it was an amazing experience. I remember sitting him down when we started the book, because he had kind of sworn off shoulder pads for a while. Like, I don't know if, you know, the heat from online, well, that guy just draws, you know, shoulder pads and pouches and all this stuff. And
he went cold turkey.
He had done a run on X-Force where Cable has no shoulder pads, just wearing a t-shirt, looks super awesome, but, you know, missing them shoulder pads. And so I'm telling him, like, I want these guys to look like walking tanks. I want more pouches than you've ever drawn on X-Force. I want more shoulder pads.
More pouches.
I want shoulder pads on shoulder pads on shoulder pads. And I was able to get him to do a little bit of stuff, but, you know, just being able to sit and have conversations with him, you know, because I'd become pretty good friends with him like long before, but I'd never really collaborated with him. And Rob, you know, doesn't get enough credit for being as creative as he is. I mean, you have to really just kind of take a minute and go, how many characters did he create for Marvel? Yes, he created Cable. Yes, he created Deadpool.
And a
yes,
ton
he
of
created
others.
Domino, Shatterstar. But you could literally like make a list of at least 80 characters that he would just draw in the background of New Mutants, and then like maybe they would show up, maybe they wouldn't show up. You know, from Forearm to Reaper to Strife to like all like just a amazing amount of ingenuity and like creativity that comes from him. You know, it was one of the greatest experiences collaborating with an artist, because I'd be like, I don't know, maybe a guy does this, maybe a guy does this, and then he would be like, no, he does this, and he's like this, and he's got this, and this, and well, I have a guy that's like this, and do this,
And
and
he's acting like this, and he's like
and
screaming.
I'm like, oh yeah, oh God, yeah, no, that's good.
You were hounding Larson to help you get into the business. Tell me
Yeah.
about that and how you got to work on Super Patriot that way.
I was very young. I was like 19, 20, and I was doing this book called Battle Pope and self-publishing it. And there's this guy named Terry Stevens that started this website called penciljack.com. And it was an artist resource message board where people would talk about comic art and the different tools that they use and stuff. And I used it to go on and see art that people were posting, and then I'd like contact them and get them to do books with me. Mm-hmm. So it was very useful. But he, befriended him, and we did some comics together too. But he was going to do a section of that website that was artist interviews. And so he was going to have interviews with all kinds of comic book artists, and he had talked to Eric Larson. And so we're just chatting one day, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to do an interview with Eric Larson for the website. And I was like, can I do that interview for you? So he's like, yeah, sure, no, that's fine. And so he gives me Eric Larson's number and tells me like, oh yeah, we're gonna call Eric about this time, so he'll be expecting your call. And I'm like, great. I interviewed him for honestly 2.5 hours. We got to be pretty good, buddies by the end of 2 hours, and he, kept saying like, oh my gosh, I've never been interviewed by somebody that like knows so much about my book, and this is really refreshing. And
Invincible was the first Kirkman book to really start getting buzz,
right,
in terms of being adapted into another medium. What was it like having that book, and then all of a sudden The Walking Dead, it seemed like it was almost, for some people it might be a meteoric rise, mm-hmm. but it was really a slower, steadier rise to...
Invincible was, my marquee book. Invincible launched in January of 2003. Walking Dead didn't come out until October of 2003. And it's funny because I feel like having those two books working in tandem really kind of built the foundation of my career, because you were able, as a reader, to be like, this guy does this and this, like what's going on? These things are so different. But there were shocks and surprises and all kinds of cool stuff in there that I think helped me build a fan base. And Invincible, almost got canceled very early on, because our book debuted and it was pretty strong, but then our sales, kind of dwindled to the point where there was a time when I was writing issue 9 or 10 where I thought 13 was going to be the last issue. And I think that Walking Dead coming out when it did, and it kind of rising in sales the way it did, like really helped Invincible kind of chug along and kept it going to find the legs to where it kind of took off.
When you became partner, what was that conversation like? Did you initiate it? Did they initiate it and say, hey, we want to make you not just part of it, we want you to be one of the partners of the company? How did that come about?
I had started talking to Todd McFarlane about Haunt, and he was kind of the last guy that I got to know really well. I get to hang out with him a bunch, and he was kind of lamenting one day about, these artists and writers these days, they don't value themselves enough. It's something that really sticks in his craw, and it's something I really admire about him, because he's always supportive of creators and artists, and really wants them to invest in themselves. And he's kind of sitting there, he's like, these guys, they build their names at Image and they do all these books for themselves, and then Marvel comes calling, and then they're off, and they're off.
He doesn't understand that. He can't understand how.
I mean, I can't understand it, because it's like you're basically at Image, you're basically the owner of a restaurant, and then Steak and Shake calls or Red Lobster calls, and you're like,
that's the Kentucky guy.
I would love
That's such a Kentucky, the Steak and Shake. Well done.
Sorry. I changed it to Red Lobster at the last minute. But like, to be the owner of your own restaurant and have Red Lobster call and be like, hey, you want to come cook some fish for us? And be like, oh my God, finally I'm getting called to the big leagues. I get to be at the grill at a Red Lobster. And it's like, you owned your own restaurant. You were building your own empire. Like, what are you doing? And so Todd and I were kind of talking about that. And at the time I was doing some work at Marvel. And I just looked at him and I was like, look, man, I hear you loud and clear. I'm never going to stop doing Invincible and Walking Dead. Like, I love doing my books there. At some point in the future, like, I'm going to be leaving Marvel, and I'll probably never work there again. The next thing I knew, I'm a partner in a company that my pull box was the basis of at the first comic shop that I went to. all the posters on my wall were Image, and you know, now I'm at the center of it, which is extremely surreal. Being a partner at Image Comics is far more surreal and impressive to me when I think back on what my former, you know, child self would think is the coolest thing about my life now. Way better than the Walking Dead show.